Okay, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this morning's webinar. We have a few minutes for some questions and answers. If my fellow panelists would like to turn on their cameras and their microphones and join me. Can I just thank the panelists for their very insightful presentations this morning. Clearly, this is a really important area going forward that our companies involved with. So we're happy to take some questions in the time we have left. Can I maybe just kick off with a few that have come through? Pete, maybe a question for you. So in the early days of innovative businesses, when they're developing ideas and they're maybe pre-trading, they have to consider their technical development, their commercial application, their regulatory pathway. At what point do they need to start to focus on sustainability as a key part of that development pathway?
I suppose the easy answer is to say right at the beginning. I mean, it's, that example I gave of the new medtech strategy, they want to build circularity into medical technology, which obviously covers a range of things. I think the sooner you look at that, the better, really. Everything from, the supply chain, the materials that you're using, the repairability of the product, if that's the case. I think, I think as soon as you're, you've got an idea, just start building net zero thinking, as I said earlier, into your business strategy and into the product or service that you deliver. And we have got, again, on our website, on the Health Innovation Network, we have got a guidance document helping people navigate the innovation pathway, and you'll see reference to net zero in there. And I'm 99% certain they've done the same thing. They've made reference to it quite up front, but it's kind of a little section in its own right. But
okay, thanks, Pete. Also, the question here might be best for you to answer. We've had some questions around some of the challenges in getting COPE3 data in Northern Ireland. Have you any suggestions or ideas there?
Yes, I've just finished working on the Scope 3 for the largest energy user in Northern Ireland. So where you can quantify, so let's say you're purchasing chemicals or medical goods or something, and they're of a sort of uniform nature, then you can use a sort of incremental analysis to devise a kilogram CO2 per unit and multiply that out. Where you cannot, then you should do it on a pound spend basis, and you can use there are 4 or 5 European databases which are continuously updated, and almost certainly all of the capital purchases and even the operational purchases made by the NHS fall under those categories. Now, there are some websites that provide, I'm not sure I'm allowed to identify the specific websites, but if you wish, I'll send on the details by email to you, Brendan. But these provide paid or unpaid access to all of the EU databases. So it is quite easy, actually, to quantify Scope 3 in its entirety.
Do you mind if I come in on that? Do you mind if I come in on that as well, please? That's just to add to that answer. Yeah, obviously spend-based is a really good starting point. There are some platforms out there that allow you to map your own supply chain, and with that, then your suppliers can then submit their data that then helps it become more and more accurate. We're working with a company as well that are specifically focused on the IT and data and digital world. So there are some niche products out there, as well as platforms, as I said, just to manage your supply chain. And I think, it depends on how big you are as an operation when you might need the more granularity.
Well, as I say, the methodology should be quantification first, physical quantification first. If you cannot do that, you rely on the pound spend basis, and that is accepted in all standards as a best practice approach to Scope 3 quantification.
Okay, thank you. Ramesh, there's a question here for Almac. What's the likely timescale that you'll start to push out your supplier program and setting them targets for carbon reduction emissions? Are you likely to accept the CRP, or will you be rolling out some of the more pharma-based emissions, pharma-based measures?
Actually, we recently started the supplier engagement program with our top 100 suppliers. So basically, through that program, what we are trying to achieve is the carbon emission for a particular quantity of products what we are getting from them. So as Mr. Alistair mentioned, we started our benchmarking of scope 3 by calculating spend-based method, using spend-based method, which we know it's not, the accuracy is very low, but the data availability is very high for that. So we basically what we done, we started our quantifying of scope 3 by using spend-based analysis, and we are approaching our suppliers to get more specific data, which will be more accurate. But unfortunately, the data availability is very low. I mean, given point of time, the data availability is very low right now.
Okay, thank you. Just got a question popped in the chat here. This might be one for you, Hayley. If one of the main NHS focuses is on supply chain, i.e. the purchase of goods and services, then why wouldn't that category be one of the mandatory scope 3 for organisations to complete in their CRP?
So there's a very simple reason for this. The CRP has come from a public procurement note, so PPN 0621. Those are written by the Cabinet Office and are applicable across government. So it is not something that has been written by the NHS. So that is why the subset of scope 3 have been dictated by the Cabinet Office. They have not been written by the NHS.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you very much. Amanda, you articulated very well how you develop your CRP within your own organisation. In terms of the companies you work with and you support, what are the main challenges that SMEs are experiencing in developing those CRP plans?
I think one of the main challenges is just the time to make sure that you're pulling the right information together and putting that in the appropriate documentation, having an awareness of all of the information that's out there. It's not that it's not important, it's just the time that it requires to deliver on those. So yeah, that's been one of the main challenges. Even when you bombard people with information, it's difficult to sit down and have that headspace to think about it and start writing those carbon reduction plans.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. So we're out of time almost. I'll give Gillian the last question, the last word. Gillian, obviously there's a lot of action required by companies here. Can you maybe just outline from your perspective, from Energy University of Invest and I, what support is available to SMEs and how they can get that support?
Yeah, thanks, Brendan. Yes, for businesses in the sector in Northern Ireland, we can provide free consultancy support if your resource spend is around £30,000 on an annual basis. So that's in terms of energy, waste, raw material and water costs. We have a consultancy framework that can provide free support in terms of maybe you want to look at energy efficiency. You might want to look at MM&T stuff. You might want a feasibility assessment around particular technologies, or you might want to look at the scope 1, scope 2 in terms of your carbon footprint, and sort of getting some advice and help to start the journey in terms of looking towards a carbon reduction plan and net zero 2050. We also have a environmental sustainability assessment for businesses, where we can look at helping you to kickstart that journey in terms of sustainability as well. We don't cover the social and the financial aspect on that. It's purely looking at the environmental impact associated with your performance as a business, and we can provide free consultancy support for that as well.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. So we are out of time. We'll wrap up there. Really just a few takeaways from me. And quite clearly there is a climate emergency happening with lots of evidence of that over the summer with fires and floods, and that is now a health emergency. Sustainability targets are obviously coming from government downwards. These have to be met. There are action that our companies need to be taken. We made some great presentations this morning about what's happening in NHS England, and while Northern Ireland doesn't have formal net zero carbon sustainability policy at the moment. It is coming. I'm sure it'll look very similar to what's happening in NHS England, and they are already considering social value. And that's important. Again, the farm industry, as ultimately a supplier of the NHS, has its own programme, and that has been driven down through the pharma industry. We've already heard from Almac how they are responding to their customers, how they will pass that on. So if you need any additional support, as Gillian said, please feel to reach out to your Invest in Ag executive or dial the 0800 number, and we'll give you the support that you need. And just finally, can I just thank our speakers this morning again for their fantastic presentations and taking the time and joining us on this webinar. So thank you, everybody, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.